Monday.
Over to the Express now. Tory MP's plot to topple Rishi is just self-indulgence.
Well, okay. Did Rishi Sunak write this headline?
Honestly, guys, they did a plot to take me out. It's just self-indulgence, is what it is.
I love the way they do this. Like, do you remember when Boris Johnson was, like, plotting and briefing against Theresa May? And then she got ousted, Boris became Prime Minister. And then when people were plotting against Boris, he was like, oh, it's troublemakers. It's troublemakers is what it is.
Now one of the same people who plotted against Boris, he's now Prime Minister, and other people are plotting against him.
You know, by this point, the Conservative Party is just a social club for sociopaths, isn't it? You know, they're all brought together through their mutual hatred and loathing of the poor. But eventually they're all greeted with the realisation that they're still sociopaths and they absolutely will each other over to get to that top spot.
Tuesday.
Over to the Express now. Migrants chosen for first flight to Rwanda in spring.
God, they make it sound like you've won the lottery, don't they?
Like, imagine you're an asylum seeker and you left Afghanistan, the worst situation. Like, you were going to be clubbed round the head and fed to wild boar in front of your children.
For being a suspected Western sympathiser or something. Anyway, you make it all the way to the UK in the back of a lorry or in a small boat or something, and then you got these Tories going like, well, you look like a migrant to me.
Are you like, no, I'm an asylum seeker. I've been fleeing, like, conflict and persecution.
All right. I am. No. Put him on the plague barge with the other migrants of fighting age.
You're stuck on this god-awful prison barge.
In between two cells, you know, like the guy on the left asked for a meal and a phone call, and they gave him rope and a stool. And then the guy on the right's riddled with Legionnaire's disease.
Finally, they lure you all out to this big holding room with a trail of NHS food and warm clothing, and then out comes this big foam finger.
Just through the ship's doors, right into your mushy peas and up onto your chest. It's like, it's you.
One of those amendments was basically saying,
okay, look, we'll say that it's safe for now, but if new information should emerge that suggests that Rwanda is not actually, in retrospect, a safe and decent place to send our refugees, then maybe we just pause this legislation just for a bit while we reassess.
And the Tories in the Commons are like, no. Even if it transpires that Rwanda itself is a gigantic death camp
where we send society's most desperate to die, a veritable plebitoire. The only flight I want to see taking off before a Rwanda flight is the Prime Minister's private jet.
Wednesday.
Next to The Guardian, social media blamed for surge in young people hit by midlife crisis.
Now, I do think there's a surge in midlife crises now, in this period, versus, you know, when you contrast it to previous decades. I think it's happening more now, but I don't think it's necessarily down to social media. You know, although I accept I'm probably not the best person to opine on this, because what am I? I'm a 43-year-old father of two who works in IT trying to be a YouTuber. I think, you know, if we ask ourselves first, what is a midlife crisis? It is somebody, let's say, in their 40s typically, usually a man, trying to hark back to the earlier iterations of himself, his earlier interests, going out with his mates, going to pubs, bars, lads' holidays. And now the implication here is what exactly? Is that what, like, men in their late 30s or 40s are seeing people on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook live the high life, and then that's eliciting feelings of like, oh, I should be doing that. Look how much fun they're having, right? That's the implication. I actually think what is happening here is more interesting. Traditionally, men of that age, that is the age when they make the leap from the younger version of themselves into the realm and era of responsibility. They start having kids. They buy a house. Those responsibilities weigh them down. It frustrates that ability to go out with their mates or to, you know, pursue their career as a rapper. Now, what happens when you make having kids too expensive? It's just completely out the window for so many people. What happens when you remove home ownership? You no longer have that responsibility. Do you see what I'm getting at? Once the economy fiscally neuters you, you're kind of free to go and be the person that you always were.
Like, it's such an easy and lazy conclusion to draw from the results of this survey to be like, do you know what? The younger generations just don't want to grow up.
They're stuck in this teenage 20-something kind of period mentality. Oh, really, are they? Are you sure it's not the economy robbing them of responsibility. No. I definitely think it's just entitlement and immaturity and narcissism from the social media. I think that's what it is.
Prince Andrew's a nonce-burger.
Now, here is a thing that caught my eye, right? I'm excited to share this with you guys. It is paragon of political thought, Lee Anderson, thought by many to be very much the nerve center of modern politics. You know, finger on the pulse. He's curious, isn't he? He's the logician's logician, I think. This is Lee Anderson on Twitter this morning. And it says institutional racism. That's the title, I guess. He says, at yesterday's Home Affairs Select Committee, a fire chief accepted an independent report that stated her fire service was institutionally racist, yet she could not provide any evidence of racism. And, like, so immediately, straight off the back, I'm like, right, okay, look, Lee, mate, institutional racism and racism are two very different things. They're not the same thing. I know that's it's not the best start, but let's continue. Let's see how we go. He says, this got me thinking about racism and the whole diversity issue. Right. And I'm reading that. I'm like, did it though? You know, do we actually think it got him thinking? Was it this that finally achieved that? Is that... Because we were all waiting for a while there, Lee. You know, we were stood there, sniggling, shrugging, with our spark plugs and defibrillator, you know, like, something's got to get his brain to come online. Let's be clear. People out there in the real world do not give a toss about someone's skin colour, race, religion, sexuality, gender, etc. Now, I read this, right, and I was a bit like, hang on. just hang on a second. When he's saying, no one gives a toss about someone's skin colour or race or religion. Like, isn't this the same guy that was publicly soiling himself over Muslims taking over London the other week? Right? Like, I'm not imagining that, am I? Like, it's him, right? Same guy.
Friday, motherfuckers.
To the Mail, who may as well have done a screen grab of flag emoji Twitter and used that for their front page.
This is a story that Nike have produced the New England kit, but they've sort of adjusted the cross on the back of the neck so it looks more inclusive.
And of course, the baton of Bellandry was promptly passed to the Sun, where Keir Starmer joined calls for Nike to reassess. For what it's worth, this whole story to me is ridiculous.
It's a perfect example of the culture war populist right's obsession with symbolism over substance. This is a story, or a mini campaign if you like, that is powered by a group of people who can't hope to compete on a political or intellectual level if we're discussing the actual problems that the country faces. Your housing crisis, your NHS, your social care, your cost of living crisis. They have no solutions, empathy, or anything. Like, they just couldn't even enter that conversation.
And so in lieu of those solutions, that substance, we get what? We get symbolism. We get this cross. We get poppies.
Obsession over the cenotaph or protecting statues of Churchill. You know, it's like, hey, Tice, Anderson, Braverman, what should we do about women's safety? How can we improve the rape conviction rate? But they're like, disguise them as statues, you know, and then we'll put 20 bobbies on the beat around each of them.
It's time to don our finest MAGA caps and, realistically, some anti-toxic protective wear as we dive headfirst into all things Donald Trump. Let's go. That was the scam. And anyway, the fine, including back taxes, I guess, but mostly the fine, that was believed to be in the region of $450 million. Yeah. That is a lot of NFTs. But whereas you or I would probably balk or throw up and turn ourselves inside out at such a fine. I mean, you know, if I get like £25 fine for, you know, parking on double yellows or whatever, like I'm having to rebudget for the week. I'm like feeding my kids moss and holly leaf soup or something. They're like, "Oh, Dad, and then I give them Nurofen for their dessert.
I was just saying, like, while we're on the subject of the reform candidates being exposed for previous social media activity, I do think it's really interesting. So, like, these candidates, this all surfaced today and yesterday, right? And there was a conspicuous silence about reporting it on Sky News and BBC. And like, there's something funny in that for me. It's like if Labour have a candidate who is exposed for spouting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories at some meeting like a couple of years ago, everyone's just like, wow, that is okay, that's not on. And they immediately eject him. If the Tories are found with a candidate who has said like some unfortunate things, then they're like, oh, okay, well, that's not, I mean, that's really unacceptable, guys. That's actually quite shocking. Then they get rid of him. If reform candidates are found to have shared or written Islamophobic content or whatever, they either poach the Islamophobe from the Tories, or when stuff like this comes up, everyone just goes, well, yeah, I mean, it's a reform guy. There's no story there.